Tonight, 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony, who was charged with first-degree murder in the fatal stabbing of a teen at a track meet earlier this month, is out on bond. A judge today reducing the teen's $1 million bond to $250,000 at the request of the defense.
On April 2, 2025, Austin Metcalf laced up his cleats and stepped onto a school bus. He was 17 years old. He had a 4 GPA, a twin brother who never left his side, and a college football scout who'd been watching him for 6 months. It was raining when the bus pulled into the stadium. The track meet was delayed. Austin Metcalf had 2 hours left to live. Welcome back to Case Classified. Let's get into it. The Frisco Regional Track Meet. Athletes from a dozen North Texas high schools had gathered to compete. But the rain forced everyone into the team tents of portable shelters ringing the track, each staked with a school's banner. Austin Metcalf was under the Frisco Memorial tent with his twin brother, Hunter. 100 yards away, a 17-year-old from Frisco Centennial High School walked toward that same tent. His name was Karmelo Anthony. In his bag, he had a 4-inch buck knife, fixed blade, not a pocket knife. 2 minutes after he entered that tent, Austin Metcalf was dead. 1 stab wound, straight through the heart. The question that would consume a Texas courtroom for the next 14 months. Was it murder or was it something else? Austin Metcalf was born on February 11, 2008, a twin. His brother Hunter arrived 4 minutes later. From the day they were born, they were inseparable. Same bedroom, same football team, same class schedule. Their mother, Megan Metcalf, told reporters that Austin was the quieter of the two. The one who thought before he spoke. The one who held doors open. The one who called his grandmother every Sunday at 4 p.m. without fail. At Frisco Memorial High School, Austin carried a 4 grade point average. He played varsity football linebacker. Not the biggest player on the field, but his coaches described him with the same word every time: relentless. He studied game film at 6 a.m. He stayed after practice to run extra drills. A college scout from a Division II program had been in contact. Austin was planning to visit the campus that summer. His English teacher, in a statement read during the trial's victim impact phase, wrote, "Austin sat in the 3rd row, 2nd seat from the window. Every morning he said good morning by name to every student who walked past, not because he had to, because that's who he was." His twin brother Hunter told the court, "I've never spent more than 2 days apart from him in my entire life. We were supposed to graduate together. We were supposed to go to college together. I don't know who I am without him." Karmelo Anthony was also 17, also a junior, also an athlete. He ran track for Frisco Centennial High School. But here's where it gets interesting. Students who knew Anthony described 2 different people. To some, he was quiet, kept to himself, showed up to practice, went home. To others, he had a reputation for escalating, for turning words into confrontations. One student testified during the trial that Anthony had been involved in at least 2 prior fights at school events. Another said he had been seen with a knife before, not brandishing it, but carrying it. The prosecution raised a question that sat in the courtroom like a weight. Why would a 17-year-old bring a 4-inch fixed-blade buck knife to a school track meet? Not a pocket knife, not a multi-tool, a hunting knife, in a backpack, at a high school sporting event. Anthony's defense team argued he carried the knife for protection, that he had been threatened before, that Frisco Centennial and Frisco Memorial had a history of tension between students, and Anthony was afraid. What nobody disputes, he brought the knife. He walked into a tent that wasn't his school's, and he refused to leave. Frisco Memorial High School and Frisco Centennial High School sit 3 miles apart. Same district, same town, same demographics. But the rivalry between them, according to students who testified, was real. It wasn't gang violence. It wasn't drugs. It was the kind of tension that builds between teenagers who see each other every weekend at parties and every weekday across a football field. Territory, reputation, respect. The track meet on April 2nd was supposed to be about competition, but the rain changed the dynamic. Events were delayed. Athletes had nothing to do but wait. The team tents, meant to be separate, became crowded. Students from rival schools drifted between them, sheltering from the weather. According to multiple witness statements, Karmelo Anthony entered the Frisco Memorial tent at approximately 3:15 p.m. He was told to leave. More than once. By more than one person. Austin Metcalf was one of the students who told him to go. What happened in the next 2 minutes would be dissected by dozens of witnesses, 2 sets of lawyers, and ultimately 12 jurors who had to decide what the word murder actually means. At 6:47 a.m. on April 2, 2025, Austin Metcalf's alarm went off. He got dressed. He ate breakfast with his twin brother, scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of orange juice. Their mother would later tell investigators it was a completely ordinary morning. At 7:22 a.m., the brothers boarded the bus to Frisco Memorial High School. At 8:05 a.m., Austin walked into his first period English class. He sat in his usual seat, 3rd row, second from the window. The lesson that day was on narrative structure in literature. Austin took 3 pages of notes. He raised his hand twice. At 12:15 p.m., Austin and Hunter ate lunch together in the school cafeteria. Pizza. Austin had pepperoni. Hunter had cheese. They talked about the track meet that afternoon. Neither of them was competing, but several friends were, and the brothers had decided to go together to support the team. At 2:30 p.m., they boarded a second bus, the one that would take them to the stadium. At 3:10 p.m., they arrived. The rain had already started. Austin texted his mother, "Here, rain delay, probably won't start for a while." At 3:11 p.m., Megan Metcalf replied, "Okay, stay dry. Love you." At 3:12 p.m., Austin replied, "Love you too." It was the last message he ever sent. "Love you too," the last words Austin Metcalf ever sent to his mother. 14 minutes later, he was dead. What happened in those 14 minutes would take a jury 14 months to untangle. At approximately 3:15 p.m., Karmelo Anthony walked into the Frisco Memorial High School team tent. He did not belong there. Multiple witnesses testified to this, students from both schools, coaches, event staff. Anthony was told to leave. He refused. The accounts diverged sharply from here. The prosecution's witnesses, more than a dozen students who were inside that tent, described a heated verbal exchange. Austin Metcalf was among the students who confronted Anthony. Words were exchanged. Voices were raised. At some point during the confrontation, Anthony reached into his bag. The knife was a 4-inch fixed-blade buck knife. The prosecution would later argue that retrieving it took a conscious decision. Unzip the bag. Locate the knife, pull it out. Seconds. Deliberate seconds. According to Anthony's defense, he warned Austin Metcalf. He told him there was something in the bag. He told him not to touch him. According to the prosecution, Austin Metcalf put his hands on Anthony, pushed him. The defense described this as a physical assault that justified self-defense. The prosecution described it as a shove in a heated argument and argued that responding to a push with a knife to the chest was not self-defense. It was murder, what both sides agree on. Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf once, one wound. The blade entered the left side of Austin Metcalf's chest. It traveled between his ribs. It pierced his heart. Austin Metcalf collapsed under that tent while students watched. Some screamed, some ran, some froze. His twin brother Hunter was standing 20 feet away. First responders arrived within minutes. Austin was transported to a local hospital. He did not survive. He was 17 years old. Frisco police secured the scene within minutes. There was no manhunt. Anthony never left. He was taken into custody at the track meet, still at the scene, still in the tent. The knife recovered from the ground where it had fallen. Over the following weeks, investigators interviewed more than 40 students who had been standing inside that tent. Their statements formed the backbone of the case, but the accounts did not line up neatly. Some witnesses said Austin Metcalf was aggressive. Others said he was calm. Some said Anthony looked scared. Others said he looked angry. The physical evidence, however, told a simpler story. The knife, a 4-inch fixed blade, designed for hunting, not utility, not pocket carry, purchased by Anthony or someone in his household. The prosecution traced its origin to a sporting goods store in Frisco. Receipt dated 6 weeks before the track meet. The wound, a single stab. The angle was slightly upward, consistent, the medical examiner testified, with a deliberate thrust rather than an accidental swing. The blade traveled between the fourth and fifth ribs. It penetrated the left ventricle of the heart. The 911 call, placed by a track meet official at 3:28 p.m. 17 minutes after the confrontation began. The charge: first-degree murder, first-degree murder. The top charge. But the case sat in the Collin County court system for over a year, 14 months of motions, hearings, and 2 families waiting. Karmelo Anthony, now 19, remained free on bond. Austin Metcalf's family attended every hearing. His twin brother, Hunter, never entered the courtroom. Not once. Until the day the verdict came in. The trial began in early June 2026 in McKinney, Texas. No cameras were allowed. The judge ruled that the presence of media would compromise the testimony of the dozens of student witnesses, most of them minors when the killing occurred. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Bill Werskey, built their case on 3 pillars. Pillar 1. The knife. A 4-inch fixed-blade hunting knife, purchased 6 weeks before the track meet. Werskey held it up in court. Why, he asked the jury, would a 17-year-old bring this to a school track meet? Pillar 2. The refusal to leave. Anthony was told to leave the Frisco Memorial tent repeatedly. Witness after witness confirmed this. He chose to stay. He chose to escalate. Pillar 3. The single wound, 1 stab straight to the heart. The medical examiner testified that the angle and force were consistent with a deliberate thrust, not a panic swing, not an accident, a choice. The defense, led by attorney Heath Harris, argued self-defense. Anthony was pushed. He felt threatened. He used the knife once and stopped. That, Harris argued, was not murder. It was a 17-year-old reacting to a physical assault. Fight or flight, he fought. Once, during closing arguments, the judge gave the jury an unexpected option. In addition to murder and acquittal, they could consider manslaughter a lesser charge. A middle ground. The jury had 3 choices: guilty of murder, guilty of manslaughter, not guilty. The jury began deliberations late Tuesday morning, June 9, 2026, 3 hours. In a case with more than 40 witness statements, conflicting accounts, 14 months of legal maneuvering, and a community that had been waiting for an answer, the jury needed 3 hours. When the verdict was read, Karmelo Anthony burst into tears. His parents left the courtroom immediately. Across the aisle, the Metcalf family wept. Hunter Metcalf, Austin's twin, was in the courtroom for the first time since his brother's death. He had stayed away for 14 months. He came for the verdict. Guilty, murder, the top charge. The jury had rejected self-defense. They had rejected manslaughter. They found unanimously, beyond a reasonable doubt, that what happened under that tent was not a reaction to a push. It was murder. Anthony was remanded into custody immediately. His bond was revoked. He was taken from the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, the tension that had been building for days spilled into the street. Supporters of both families had maintained a presence throughout the trial. Law enforcement moved in numbers. Groups gathered. Conversations turned heated. The verdict did not end the division, it hardened it. The forensic question at the center of this trial was deceptively simple. What does a single stab wound tell us about intent? The medical examiner who performed Austin Metcalf's autopsy testified that the wound track was critical. The blade entered the left chest, traveled between the fourth and fifth ribs, and pierced the left ventricle of the heart. The angle was slightly upward. In forensic pathology, wound track analysis is used to reconstruct the positions of the victim and the attacker at the moment of injury. An upward angle can indicate that the attacker was slightly lower than the victim, consistent with someone thrusting upward from a defensive or agitated stance. But the medical examiner also noted the depth of the wound and the force required to penetrate the chest wall, the intercostal muscles, and the pericardium, the protective sac around the heart. This was not a glancing blow. This was not a warning cut. This was a full-force thrust. The defense's forensic expert did not dispute the wound track. They argued it was consistent with a single reactive motion, a teenager lashing out in fear, not measuring a kill shot. But the prosecution asked the jury to consider the weapon itself, a 4-inch fixed-blade buck knife. That is not a weapon of convenience. It is a weapon of preparation. The single wound cuts both ways. To the defense, it proved restraint. He stabbed once and stopped. To the prosecution, it proved lethality. One stab was all he needed. Researchers who study adolescent violence describe a phenomenon called confrontational escalation, the point at which a verbal dispute between teenagers crosses into physical violence, not because anyone intended to kill, but because the social cost of backing down is perceived as higher than the risk of escalating. In a 2023 study published by the Journal of Youth Violence and Juvenile Justice, researchers found that in confrontations involving male adolescents in competitive environments, sporting events, parties, school settings, the presence of peers amplifies the pressure to escalate. A shove is not just a shove when 50 classmates are watching. It is a public challenge. This does not excuse what happened under that tent. It does not make it self-defense. But it helps explain how two 17-year-olds who had never met before that afternoon could find themselves in a confrontation that ended one life and destroyed another in less than 2 minutes. The prosecution argued that bringing the knife was a choice made hours before the confrontation. The defense argued that using it was a choice made in a fraction of a second under threat. Both can be true. What the jury had to decide was which choice mattered more. This case has done something rare. It has forced a Texas community, and, increasingly, a national audience, to ask a question that has no clean answer. What is the line between self-defense and murder when both people are 17? The Frisco Independent School District has not announced any changes to security protocols at sporting events, but the conversation has started. Parents have asked why a student was able to bring a hunting knife into a school event. Students have asked why the tension between rival schools was allowed to build to the point where a tent became a crime scene. And a jury of 12 people, 12 strangers who spent 3 hours in a room and came out with a unanimous verdict, has drawn a line. Bringing a knife to a track meet, refusing to leave, using it. That, the jury said, is murder. Karmelo Anthony now faces a sentence of 5 years to life. The same jury that convicted him will decide his fate. The sentencing phase is ongoing as of this recording, but that's not where the story ends. Because the question this case asked, where is the line between a reaction and a crime, is the same question being asked in courtrooms across this country right now. And the answers are not the same. Austin Metcalf was 17 years old. He had a 4 GPA. He played linebacker. He held doors open. He called his grandmother every Sunday at 4 p.m. He sat in the 3rd row, second seat from the window, and said good morning to every student who walked past. He had a twin brother, Hunter, who had never spent more than 2 days apart from him in his entire life. His last words to his mother were, "Love you too." Karmelo Anthony case, a case that has divided a Texas community, forced a jury to define the boundary between self-defense and murder and left one family without a son and another facing the possibility of life in prison. Thank you for watching. The jury has spoken. The sentencing is still to come. But the question at the heart of this case, where is the line between self-defense and murder, is not going away. Because right now, in a courtroom 5,000 miles from Texas, another jury is being asked the exact same question. Outside a pub in the UK, a man was stabbed to death by someone he trusted. A detail the judge ruled inadmissible changed everything, and next week on Case Classified, I'm covering exactly what that detail was and why the jury was never allowed to hear it. Subscribe for more true crime investigations. Keep their names alive.